Hello, this is Bill Bullard with RCAF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. Well, the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA, has sailed through both the US House and US Senate. All that's left is a signing ceremony that appears to be scheduled for next week, after the president returns from the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. While speaking in Switzerland, the president reportedly said that only when governments put their own people first will people be fully invested in their national futures. And before leaving for Switzerland, the president spoke to the American Farm Bureau's annual convention, where he reportedly said, "My administration understands that if we want to stand up for America, we must stand up for American farmers. And if we want America to thrive and grow, then we must ensure that America's farms flourish and prosper." And he reportedly said, "We want our products made, grown, and raised right here in the USA." So let's contrast these comments with what is not included in the USMCA. But before we begin, let's look at a few facts about the trade in cattle and beef between the United States and Canada and Mexico. During each of the 25 years of the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, the United States had a trade deficit in the trade of cattle and beef with Canada and Mexico. The annual deficit averaged well over $1 billion during the past 25 years. In the past 5 years, it has worsened, with the U.S. exporting about $2 billion worth of beef and cattle each year and importing $4 billion worth of the very same type of beef and cattle products as we export. That means we're importing twice as much of the same commodities that we are exporting. Now remember, when the old NAFTA was passed, U.S. cattle producers were promised greater access to Canada and Mexico's markets, which would result in increased demand for U.S. beef, which in turn would result in greater prosperity for U.S. cattle ranchers. But that didn't happen. So with these facts in mind, let's look at what's not included in the new USMCA. What's not included in the USMCA is any changes at all for America's largest agricultural segment, which is the U.S. cattle industry, comprised of 729,000 beef cattle operations. And what's not included in the USMCA is any provision to empower U.S. cattle producers to compete with the $4 billion worth of cattle and beef we import from Canada and Mexico, while we export only half of that. There are fewer cattle producers, fewer beef cows, fewer feedlots, fewer sale barns, and fewer packers today than when we entered the North American Free Trade Agreement. So why would anyone think that the promises that did not materialize during the 25 years of NAFTA will somehow materialize under the new USMCA when nothing has been changed? Well, that's not entirely true. What has changed is that our industry is much smaller today, meaning it is less resilient to the drain caused by the persistent trade deficit that has occurred during the past 25 years. We just don't see how the USMCA squares with the president's urging that governments begin putting the needs of their own citizens first. How does subjecting America's independent cattle producers to a persistent trade deficit put them first? And how does the USMCA square with the president's comments that he wants our products made, grown, and raised right here in the United States, when the historical facts show we are now relying more and more on imports of beef and cattle than when we entered NAFTA 25 years ago? Perhaps I forgot to mention that imports of beef and cattle from Canada and Mexico have more than doubled in value since we entered NAFTA, jumping from under $2 billion to over $4 billion. We've offered a solution to this critical problem. That solution is to restore mandatory country of origin labeling for beef so the entire U.S. cattle industry can distinguish its superior beef products in the marketplace. This would allow Americans to choose to support American cattle farmers and ranchers. So far, we've been ignored, but it isn't over until it's over. And that won't happen until the signing ceremony next week. And that's why our members are calling and emailing the White House this week with this straightforward message. The message is this: Americans cannot do what you say and choose to buy USA beef unless mandatory country of origin labeling is fully restored for beef. And then say, I'm a cattle farmer, a rancher, or a beef consumer, and I need mandatory country of origin labeling for beef in the USMCA. We hope you will help us deliver this same message to the White House this week. And for more information, go to our website at www.labelourbeef.com. With that, we're out of time. We hope you have a productive week. Thank you and goodbye.